Dad, you're trying to be someone you're not.
This is my body, okay? If I want to dye my hair or put a ring through my nose, that's my choice.
Not a child.
Understand who you are. You listen.
You're not listening to me.
My child, I love you. Let's start with that. We haven't spoken in so long. I miss you. I know you felt you had to make your own life, to do things your own way. I'm sure at times you loved it. Felt certain you'd made the right choice. Other times, the darkness crept in. An emptiness that led to desperation and mistakes and misplaced trust.
Hey!
Some of the pain was your own doing. But some of the pain was caused by others
It's okay.
who took advantage of you.
Get whatever you want.
I think I like the
Just get
red.
them both.
Who abused your heart and wounded your soul. This was not love. Nor was it your doing.
What is that?
What's what?
What is that?
Don't
And if you
know.
find
I-
yourself rejected
Let's go.
What do you
or
mean?
lost,
Let's go.
Stop! I don't
know there is something better.
Stop! Let go of me. Just
When you feel alone, listen for my voice. You are not alone.
Mom, Dad, it's me. I was wondering about maybe coming home. I'm catching a bus up your way, and it'll get there early tomorrow morning. If you're not there, that's fine. I mean, I'll just stay on the bus, I guess.
Come by fire, come by rain. Come by boat or come by plane. You are all I can't replace. How I love to see you again. Just tell me I'll be seeing you again.
No. Wait, no, please. Stop the bus!
You can never run too far, or shout too loud, or be gone so long that you can't find your way home.
tell me I'll be seeing you again.
You can always come home.
Have you ever wanted to escape? Just get out of your situation. Just wish that you could get some freedom. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of Stephanie's at her school this past week, and she said, I hosted 45 people at my home this past weekend, and so I told my husband I'm going to work so I can get some rest. You know, it's interesting how we can try to just get away and try to relax from all the stress and anxiety in our life. So ladies, just close your eyes and imagine you're on that masseuse table right now, and someone's taking care of you. It's spa day here at Southland. And you put your mind in that place, or men, you go to that man cave or that trip or whatever it is that lets our mind or even our whole body go into escape. And sometimes what happens is that we want to run away from everything, all of our responsibilities and boundaries and even our values and what we've always known. We just don't believe there's anything for us here. We're not happy here. That's why, honestly, every couple years, I love to come back to Luke 15. Luke 15 is what some people call the lost and found department, but it's 3 stories. It's interesting at the beginning of it. There are these religious people that Jesus is talking to in this big crowd of both religious and irreligious or non-religious people. And the religious people look at him and say that they have a problem with him because he hangs out with sinners and eats with them. Like he will actually allow himself to be around people who are messed up. And that's what causes Jesus to tell these stories. So really the stories are for the religious types. And yet what's happening in the lives of the lost matter as well. So he tells the story of a lost coin and a lost sheep and how everything was set aside in order to go find those things. But then he moves into this story about a lost boy, a lost son. And the story has 2 sons in it, and we're going to talk about both of them. This week, the one who leaves, and next week, the one who stays. So if you got a Bible or a device, you can go on the Southland Guest Wi-Fi and you can connect to even the Bible app. But Luke 15 is where we're going to focus the next couple weeks. And I want to just start the reading with the first couple verses in Jesus' story to all of these people about this boy who wants to escape. And it starts with verse 11. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." And so he divided his property between them. Now understand when you're talking about an inheritance in this day and age, the older son would get 2/3 of the estate, and the rest was divided up among the others. Well, he apparently only had 2 sons, so he gave this son 1/3 of his entire estate. And it's at that point that he decides to run. Now one son stays home, but one son just wants to get out of this place. And here's what I want to start with as we're thinking about the idea of why. Why does he want to run? We don't know his motives. But this thing we do know is that sometimes I want to escape when I'm empty. I mean, when I just think that there's nothing here for me, that you have nothing to offer me, whether it's a job or whether it's family or whether it's our parents or whatever it is, we often can say, you have nothing to offer me. Now, in this story, it's a metaphor though. See, he's not necessarily talking about their earthly existence. He's basically saying that we can look at God and say, you really have nothing for me. You know, I want to do things differently. I don't relate to you like I do other people. You just don't understand me. It seems, God, you don't want me to have any fun. You know, I'm tired of this life that I'm living. I want a new adventure. I think I can find who I am somewhere else. And maybe it's just that the stress of life, the pressure of life, causes you to want to run from what you've always known. That's basically what the son is saying to his father, and in a sense, those who want to escape say to God. there's nothing here for me. I want something different. I want something better. I want something more. Now, remember, there were a lot of people in the crowd that Jesus was talking to that were actually far from home, the metaphor home. They weren't walking with God. They'd been through generations of pagan religions where people were ignoring God or worshiping other gods in temples. So they were pretty confused. But here's the interesting part of Jesus' whole preaching ministry. Generally speaking, it was the irreligious people who were drawn most to his messages. It was the outcasts who connected with Jesus the most. I think that's pretty interesting because in this story, the son who leaves represents all those outcasts. So they're hearing a story about themselves. And Jesus is teaching them that if you've wandered from home, you probably thought you had good reason to do so. It probably made perfect sense to you. But here's ultimately what I think he emphasizes on. Look what he sees here. Notice the focus of the younger son's demand. Look at it. Give me my share of the estate. Now, this would have been really offensive, honestly, in this culture to anyone listening, no matter what religion or no religion. This idea that a younger son would go to his father and make demands upon him of what belongs to him. It's not his yet. Dad's still living. And he says, give me what is mine. And when the focus is on me, there always seems to be a good reason to take what is mine and do my own thing. Be independent. But we know from his demands that he's pretty much already declared his independence from his father. And I get it, as a parent, I get it. My goal is to raise my kids so that they can become independent. Can't wait to stop writing the college checks. I just got to tell you. I want them to be independent. But if we help them to mature, we're also showing them that in their independence, their life is about so much more than just me. Your life is about so much more than just me. And as hard as we try, sometimes our children don't ever learn the lesson, but to be honest, a lot of us have never learned that lesson as well. We haven't grown up, we've just grown old. And we haven't figured that out. This boy saw his opportunity to declare his independence, to get what was his, and to start making his own decisions, to go out there on his own, escaping his dad. It's interesting, if you look at some of the people's stories who might be celebrities or who you might believe have everything you would ever want in life. I remember I was a tennis player in high school, and so I was always a big fan of professional tennis players and followed them into college even. And in 1985, Boris Becker, at 17 years old, won Wimbledon. 17 years old, had everything he could have ever wanted. Teenager. When I was 17, I couldn't even have a winning record in tennis, and he's winning Wimbledon. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, it must be awesome to be Boris Becker. And yet Boris Becker will tell you that in those days of glory and in the pressure to always win and succeed and get everything he ever wanted, he became very depressed, very lonely. He began to drink heavily, take prescription drugs, and ultimately he said, I was even suicidal. At the top of his game with everything you'd think you'd want, he was depressed. Now, maybe you're a person who's decided a relationship with the Father isn't what you've been looking for in life. That was my parents' faith, or that was all of those flamin' fundy Christians' faith, and I don't want anything to do with them. None of my friends believe this, and I've found something so much better. And I get it. But you know what? Jesus gets you. And he's trying to connect this whole story to you. And it's the way you try to escape that's the issue. Because some of us need to escape some bad situations. I get it. It's not always bad to escape. It's what you escape to that becomes the issue. This son's issue and yours. So with that, keeping that in mind as we looked at him just declaring his independence and claiming his money, let's keep reading. Look at verse 13. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen in that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now, you see, I guess the point is that escape doesn't always deliver. You may not find what you're looking for when you run away from where you are. Now, I don't know if any of you ever read Jack Higgins' novels. He has a famous novel called The Eagle Has Landed. It sold a lot. He was very well read and has a lot of novels that you could pick up in any bookstore or on Amazon. But here's the interesting thing. He was asked in an interview, what would you like to have known when you were just a boy? And his response was this: when you reach the top, there's nothing there. When you reach the top, there's nothing there. Because when all you want is what this earth has to offer, and that's the extent of your desire, you'll find out that it's not enough. It's never enough. We get a pretty good idea how this son lived when it says that he participated. In English, we translate it wild living. It also could be translated extravagant living. So the common belief is that the boy simply left home and partied down. Let's party down. And we get that not only from what appears to be his motives, but also later when he comes home, his older brother says to him, you let him squander his inheritance on prostitutes and drinking. And so we think that that's all he did, but when you look at the translation of wild living, it means so much more than that. It actually meant eating, drinking, illicit behavior, giving gifts, shopping extravagantly. That's what it meant. It wasn't just limited to the party life. It was the idea that I could just spend and please myself in every possible way, and there I will find myself. Jesus' point here with the whole wild living comment is that this son believed fulfillment was found in escaping his father and satisfying every basic instinct. If I just satisfy my instincts, I will be whole. Now the rationale goes something like this. Here's a quote. If I get everything I want, I'll have everything I need. The problem is that sometimes we want the wrong things, or we want things that ultimately don't satisfy. Everyone here in the story couldn't believe that a son would actually tell his father to give up his inheritance now. So it seemed like one of those typical parables of Jesus where it was a big exaggeration to get his point across. But many of them, here's the thing, many of them, while being shocked that he would have this son in the story demanding his inheritance before his father died, many of them wished that they could have had their inheritance right then as well. He knew he was speaking into the heart of everyone listening, because that's how we are sometimes. We believe that our happiness is found in the accumulation of stuff, or power, or relationships, or position, or titles, or reputation. We believe that our happiness is found in the accumulation of earthly, extravagant living. And we never think of ourselves as squandering anything, do we? Oh, I don't squander anything. I mean, I have things to show for it. But when we live our lives only for the latest pleasure, only to satisfy the latest insatiable desire for more or different, we soon end up wanting something else or more or different again. I think about this all the time when Landon and I talk all the time about video games. And I mean, he gets a video game, he's got to have it, he spends his money on it, he wants to have it, he plays it and beats it, and that's it, it's over, never plays it again. Now he's got to have something else, something different, something more challenging, something better. And I think to myself, there we are, pointing our long, judgmental, bony fingers at kids because of the video games they played, and they're never satisfied, and yet we all do the same thing. And we all have our video games in our life, where we just think we need one more thing that's going to make us happy, only until it doesn't anymore. And that's who the Son is. Now, I get it. There's a difference in escaping from reality and escaping to reality. And a lot of times people think that those who enter into a faith experience with God are trying to just escape from reality. They don't want to live in the real world. And here's the truth of the matter. This is the story of Jesus' life and message, is that when you find God and he helps you understand the person he designed you to be, that is reality. And you're escaping to reality when you run to him. That's what he's trying to help you understand. And finding your God-designed men and women always delivers. It always delivers. And Jesus even points it out by bringing famine. He brings a crisis to the story just to make sure he emphasizes it to us. He brings the famine and he says, look, when you go off to a far-off country and crisis hits, you find out who your true friends really are. I mean, just walk through a hard time. You thought you escaped when you left home. You found something better, new, shiny, awesome. But who will be there when the times get tough? All the people that you extravagantly blessed with your inheritance, will they be there if you have nothing? Now, the way Jesus tells the story, the son ends up hungry and he ends up alone. And here's what he says, verse 16, no one gave him anything. So people who've wandered off, I talk to them all the time. And they don't know what to do, and they're lost, and they're just drifting out there. And it's interesting how they say it. They say, I'm so lonely, even though I have a lot of people all around me. Because they just don't get what I'm going through or care what I'm going through. Now, they were having fun, but it wasn't fulfilling anymore. And most of them said when they experienced hard times, listen, they found someone who was more like their past to help them through it than their present. Isn't it interesting? The person who they thought could help them is the person who was grounded in a faith, a person who was grounded in talking to God on their behalf. And all of a sudden, crisis reminds them of what life was like with the Father. Let's finish reading here, verse 17. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And so he got up and he went to his father. And I guess the reality of Jesus' message is that often what you were looking for was there all the time. It was there all the time. Came to his senses is what he said. Actually, you can also translate that in English. He came to his right mind. He realized what the decisions I had made were just really wrong, and I'm now recognizing that. And it's funny, men and women, how hard times can help you remember what's really important. Put a little crisis in your life, and all of a sudden, your values change a little bit. Many of the people listening to Jesus were living in the consequences of their choices. They were sitting there saying, he might as well have put my name on that son. I felt pleasure of desires met. I knew what it meant to have everything I wanted, and yet I was still longing for happiness. But they also experienced the emptiness of doing life alone when serious problems arose. That's what he's trying to say. Now, I get it. Some people in this room today who feel like, hey, I don't need God, and none of my friends would abandon me when times got tough. I know they would be there for me. They wouldn't bail on me when I went through a crisis. And then sometimes you might be thinking this. And the truth is, it was church or family or Christians who let me down, It was churches or families or Christians who judged me. We say that judge me all the time. Don't judge me. We say it all the time. Don't judge me, meaning don't have an opinion about my behavior. I should just be able to do what I want. Don't judge me. And here's this kid living the don't judge me life and realizing that perhaps it wasn't the fact that the friends were there for him, but perhaps it was the fact that the friends were trying to draw him into other ways of escaping when escaping didn't work. In other words, more talk, more drink, more medication, more self-indulgence. Just more of that will help you handle all of this crisis that you're going through. More escape, but the problem remains. Jesus is saying to the wanderers, look, come to your senses, change your mind. It's time to come home. To come home. Now, coming to your senses, men and women, isn't just admitting that you've blown it when you escape the Father. It's more than just admitting you've blown it. Coming to your senses means you're ready to make a choice and then take action upon that choice. You know, he admits the reality. You can see it here. He's planning his speech for the Father. He says, here's what I'll say to him. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. Well, that's a great start. That's a good place to say, you know what, I've messed this up. But coming home requires more than just a confession of your past sins. I mean, he could have stayed there in the pigsty and had a lot of self-pity, feeling sorry for himself. But I want you to understand why Jesus uses the pig as the metaphor here for the life he's living. In this culture, in the Middle East, among Jews, Muslims, Palestinians, all of them, pigs are unclean. Trust me, I was just there last week. There is no pork bacon in the Middle East. I can tell you that right now. Turkey bacon, chicken bacon, vegetarian bacon, but it ain't no good pork bacon. I'm just going to tell you, it's not. Because they can't be near it. You can't touch it. And so the fact that this kid ends up in the pig pen is a metaphor for all of them to say he is at the lowest of the low. You're not only not supposed to eat it, you're not supposed to be anywhere near it. And he ends up being the one feeding the pigs and wishing he could eat the food that they were eating. Now, you may be saying to yourself, you know what, I'm not that messed up. You know what, I'm not that horrible. I'm not at the bottom of the barrel. No, you're missing the point. What Jesus is saying here is that it doesn't matter how far you feel like you've gone from God. No matter where you are, you can always come home. You know, it's always been there for you. And so here it is. When he starts to deliver his speech, he comes home. The Father sees him, runs out to meet him. Verse 21, here it is. Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And it's like the Father interrupts him. Like, hey, let's celebrate. We're going to have a party because he's home. And there will be no rejection, no lowering of your status in the family. No, verse 24. This son of mine was dead, and he's now alive. He was lost, and now he's found. And that's what you find when you come home. That's what you find when you come to your senses. He's not waiting to punish or ridicule you. And by the way, this is just a little bit of a bridge to next week, a little shameless commercial for you to come back next week. You believers, next week's all about you. Especially when you want to punish and ridicule those who are far from God. That's not how God does it. He runs to welcome you home, where you belong, where you've always been wanted and you've always been loved by your Father. You have never stopped being his son. He just wants you to realize it and recognize the joy that comes from that. Well, look, I'm not trying to go all Wizard of Oz on you here, like just click your heels and there's no place like home. And, it's way deeper than Dorothy and Auntie M. Because what we're talking about here is the person who well, who's tried to find so much joy in so many things that have disappointed them. They realize that all along, it was knowing God and walking with him is the place that they should be. You know, I love hearing stories of people who've been friends of mine, or who I've been a pastor in their church, or youth pastor. And not too long ago, I got an email from Jacob. He was a young man in my youth ministry back in Ohio when I was a youth pastor. And he said, "Hey, Steve," it's like, like we'd never stopped talking or something. "Hey, how you doing?" And he said, "I want to bring you up to date on my story." And I hadn't seen Jacob in 15 years. And he was talking about all this hard stuff that he went through. He said it this way. He said, "Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump is like a metaphor for my life. Just went through all this stuff and honestly just wished I would have died, that I would have felt more noble." But he said, God took me through a bunch of stuff where I ended up very alone. And it was interesting. He said it like this. I wrote it down so I make sure I said it right. "I've never seen like literal writing on a billboard or a wall saying, 'Hey, Jake, this is God.' But perhaps I wasn't in the place to listen. Maybe I wasn't in the place to listen." He said, "I'm driving down the road, and out of the blue, I'm listening to a radio station, and a Christian song comes on that just starts speaking to me out of nowhere. And I had to pull over to the side of the road because I was a mess. And there in that moment, I just gave my heart back to God. And I've been so, life's been so awesome ever since." Now here's the interesting thing. He said, and by the way, the whole sky thing, writing it in the sky, the billboard thing, "Hey, Jake," he said, after I just prayed right there on the side of the road and started to drive home, he said it wasn't too long before I drove up and there was a guy standing on the side of the road with one of those signs that says, "God loves you." So I got my billboard too. Men and women, I think God's just trying to show you through a story that you're never too far away. And today, he's chasing you. He's running after you. And today, you need to be reminded that the love of God is back home with him. It's what you've been looking for. Fulfillment found with the Father, not escaping him. Running to the Father, not away from him. And that's the place where you'll find what you're looking for. Would you bow your heads and pray with me? Jesus, over and over again, when we read the things you taught and stories you told, we're just reminded of how crazy you are about us, how much you love us. You long for us to walk with you and discover what you designed us to be. And I just want to thank you so much. But I know today in this room, there are men and women who are far from home. And they're trying to escape with a lot of other stuff. I pray, God, that you would open up their eyes and help them come to their senses and realize that you are what they're looking for, and they'll be empty forever without you. And if that's you right now in this moment who I'm praying for, you can pray to him right now where you're seated. You can respond to this. You can just pray something like this: "Lord Jesus, you see where I am. Forgive me. I receive your forgiveness. I am a child of God. Thank you for saving me. Help me to live for you." You can pray that kind of prayer right now. You can do that. Talk to him. Oh Lord, thank you for your great grace. We don't deserve it, but here we find again your arms wide open to love us, to strengthen us, to help us through any crisis. Most of all, to give us hope and eternal life. So we give ourselves to you again this morning in worship, in devotion, commitment in our life. And now hear our song of praise, hear our worship. Receive glory from it in Jesus' name.